is Smoky Quartz. Oh my god. That's what I get for throwing this palette around. I always say, like, what is the word for it? As if English isn't my first language. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with my hair either. I was just messing around trying to come up with a hairstyle for this video, and I ended up with this like part up side bun and then accessorized it with some flowers. I also left this little tail here because I don't know, I was feeling it. All right, man, I need to stop saying at the beginning of all my videos that I'm so excited, but I am so excited to film this finally because I have spent so many hours like researching and swatching all of my eyeshadows and so on and so forth to come up with the dupes for all 15 shades of the new Mulan Colourpop eyeshadow palette. Colourpop today, the day that I'm filming this, which is March 13th, released a collaboration collection with Mulan, the like live action movie. And part of that collection is a 15 shade eyeshadow palette, which retails for $22 on the website. I'm already sweating talking about this. Maybe I'm just excited. Growing up, Mulan was my favorite princess, Disney princess, and obviously I could relate with her on more of a cultural level, but besides that, I liked her character the most, like her actual character as well as the storyline. I thought it was a lot more meaningful than a lot of other movies that I grew up watching. I also want to note there's some controversy with the live action Mulan, just with the main leading actress who's playing Mulan has said some things against like reprimanding the Hong Kong protesting, trying to protect their rights. But yeah, so a lot of Asian Americans, Asian Australians, Asian Canadians are boycotting this movie in theaters because of the lead actress. We'll take that, put it aside, and just talk about this eyeshadow palette. When this palette came out, I was immediately intrigued by the concept, but looking at the palette more, I was like, it's not a groundbreaking palette by any means. The shades were very kind of plain and toned down, but I think that's very much to the theme, and as well as incorporating red and gold elements as well as earthy tones. Seeing as I am actively trying not to buy makeup this year, I decided to go through all of my eyeshadows and see if I can dupe every single shade in this palette, and it turns out I could. This idea of duping new releases with what we already own is also not an original idea on my part. I'm highly inspired by Lauren May Beauty as well as Hannah Louise Poston. Before we start, let me put up a picture of the Colourpop Mulan palette here, and I will keep this up for reference throughout the video. And I'm gonna scoot over a little bit. And I'm also going to put my photoshopped Mulan palette at the bottom. Mediocrely photoshopped. I like photoshopped the colors that I own into the original Mulan palette, and I'm calling it Mulan palette. So dumb. So that way through the video you can kind of compare, see where we are, and follow along. So how I will be organizing this video and presenting all this information is to first go through shade by shade for the dupes of each of the shades from left to right across a row, and then left to right the next row, and then the next row. As we go, I'll show you swatches on my hand or on my arm. I will, in discussing the shades, also be referencing some still shots from Makeup Just for Fun's video that she did on this eyeshadow palette, showing swatches, review, and look. And I did DM Amanda, Makeup Just for Fun, on Instagram before filming this to get the okay that I can use those images, so don't come at me. Amanda knows I'm using her images. And I know this is a really long intro, but all of this information is really important. With two different eyeshadows, if they look the same in a palette, just in its pan, it doesn't mean that they're gonna look the same once you shear it out on the skin. And likewise, if you have two shades that look very different in their pans, when you swatch them, they can look very similar. And so some of these picks may look in the pan different than the like original ones that are included in the Mulan palette. I did extensive research. I watched That Girl Shay XO's eye swatch video that came out last night. I also watched Makeup Just for Fun's video as well as Colourpop's swatch videos, so I could see each of the shades in action, in movement, in different lightings. Finally, we are here to start talking about each of these shades. I'm letting you know the distribution at the beginning. I found 6 dupes in the So Jaded palette, 4 dupes in the Going Coconuts palette, and 2 dupes in the Honey palette. So with those 3 palettes, I like covered 12 out of the 15 shades. And the last 3 shades were among 3 other palettes, but you'll see them. They are also very mainstream palettes that a lot of us will own. I feel like I'm gonna be like wiping my sweat through this entire video. My boyfriend just informed me that my AC was set to 76 instead of 73, so hopefully it gets better. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading my notes. Now, starting from the top left of the palette, we have Imperial, which is described as a nude taupe. The shade from my collection corresponding to that you can find in the Going Coconuts palette, and it is the top right shade named Culotta. And this looked like just a very dependable shade. Here is Culotta from Going Coconuts. Again, nothing groundbreaking here. The second shade, Strike a Match, is described as an icy champagne with pinpoints of bronze. And this is one of their foiled formulas, which is similar-ish to their previous pressed glitter formulas, but more suspended in a formula that's kind of similar to the Super Shock shadow. So it's similar to Super Shock, but a lot glitterier, more glittery. And this shade, Strike a Match, is very interesting. On the website, within the palette, it looks like champagne with like a kind of like a warm leaning champagne, but when I was looking at all the swatches of it, it looks very icy and white with a little bit of that gold running through. So the shade that I found that looks very similar to it is again from this palette, and it is the top middle shade here called Palm Reader, and on Colourpop's site this is described as a white with gold flip. Strike a Match is icy champagne with pinpoints of bronze, while as Palm Reader is white with gold flip. Oh, I accidentally got like a lot of eyeshadow, so this is like a very chunky formula, but I actually think that the Mulan one is also going to be kind of chunky because it's the foiled formula. So here is Palm Reader. Oh my god, let me get some of that. So I definitely picked up too much of that product, but here is Palm Reader. The third shade is Be Swift, which is a vibrant warm gold, and it is another one of the foiled eyeshadows. So for gold shadows, I thought of first my Juvia's Place, the Saharan palette, and of course the Honey palette from Colourpop. And the Juvia's Place Saharan is more like grungy green gold, so that one didn't match the tones of Be Swift. And looking in the pan, I originally thought that I would choose Dandy, but actually looking at the swatches and swatching it on my own body, the shade that suits it best is this darker gold here, Queen Bee. And the official description of Queen Bee is Metallic Dandelion. Now, in the pan, this looks much darker than Be Swift does, but if you look at the swatches, I'll put some up here, you can see that it, like where the light hits is very bright, but there is this deeper shadow where, you know, like the light is not hitting it directly. And I'll swatch Queen Bee now. I find that this shade has a similar depth when it's in the shadows. So here is Queen Bee. The fourth shade is Fighter, which is a peachy beige. This dupe I found in my Colourpop So Jaded palette. And like I said, I found 6 of the dupes in this palette. The color schemes obviously are very different between the Mulan and the So Jaded. So I was actually kind of surprised to see that there were so many similar tones within these 2 very different color schemes. But the shade that we're talking about, the peachy beige, I am comparing to Royal Jewels. The official description of Royal Jewels is a neutral peach, which is compared to a peachy beige, which is the Mulan description. So again, not a revolutionary color by any means, but a dependable one that has its place within the palette. And there is a very thin swatch of Royal Jewels. I just built that one up the tiniest bit. Now moving on to the 5th shade, which is Like a Girl, described as a silver taupe, and this is one of the foiled formulas. For this, we're going back to the Going Coconuts palette, and the shade within this that's comparable is Cocoa Crush. The Colourpop description of Cocoa Crush is an icy pale champagne, which the description is very different from Silver Taupe, which is the description of Like a Girl. However, in the swatches, Cocoa Crush has a similar, like it has the tiniest bit of warmth. It's mostly neutral with a little bit of warmth and almost pinkiness. And there is a big difference between where the light hits and where the shadows lie. I was actually surprised to see the description of Like a Girl be Silver Taupe because I saw, at least to my eyes, some pink in it. I'll put up some pictures of a swatch of Just a Girl here, and maybe you can see some of the pink that I'm seeing too. Here is Going Coconuts Cocoa Crush. And I extended this swatch out a little bit further so you can see that contrast I'm talking about right here. So those are the first 5 shades in the first row of this palette. The next shade, the first one in the second row, is Warrior, described as a warm terracotta undertone with silver, green, gold duochrome. So that description sounds like what? And looking at the swatches of the shade, it looks stunning. It's a beautiful, beautiful shade. And unsurprisingly, it reminded me immediately of one of my favorite shades from the So Jaded palette. So what I saw in this shade was a kind of mysterious shade. This shade also has a lot of different tones in it. It's a little bit bronzy, a little bit pink, a little bit silver, and it's just a really unique shade. The shade that it reminded me of from my So Jaded palette is Smoky Quartz. A shade just fell out! Oh my god! It actually fell out of its pan. This is Diamond, the Super Shock Shadow, so I'm gonna have to scrape that up off the floor in a little bit. That's what I get for throwing this palette around. But anyways, the color I'm talking about is Smoky Quartz here at the bottom, and I will give you a swatch of that so we can see what it looks like. And the description of Smoky Quartz is an icy taupe. Smoky Quartz from So Jaded. This shade, as well as a shade above it, are both very interesting shades, and I don't think that these dupes are exact, but they give the same vibe and have the same effect. So here you can see that the shade gives a little bit of bronze and pink and silveriness and iciness, which I think embodies the shade Warrior really well. The next shade is Honor, described as a cool deep brown. And for this shade, I didn't find one within my Colourpop palettes, but I did in my Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry palette. The shade from Sultry that fulfills the cool deep brown spot is Twig here. And I was actually surprised to see the official description of Honor to be a cool deep brown, because the shade doesn't look very deep to me at all. And also going forward, as we go into the deeper shades, you'll see a similar theme of having shades that are like almost dull, very subdued. So a terracotta is a very subdued terracotta, or a red brown is a very brown leaning red brown. So Honor looks pretty mid-tone to me. However, it's described as cool deep brown. A swatch of Twig. That is the cool deep brown. The official Anastasia Beverly Hills description of Twig is an earthy cool tone brown. Next we have Loyal, which is described as a rich red with gold flecks, another one of those foil formulas. And this is more of a color dupe. It doesn't really replicate the effects of like the foil formula with the gold flecks. And the shade that I picked for this one is from the Anastasia Beverly Hills Jackie Aina palette, and that is the shade Wiggleze, this metallic red here. I found this shade probably the hardest one to find a dupe for, and I honestly wouldn't really say that Wiggleze is a good dupe for it. This is like a loose dupe of a metallic red, because also metallic reds aren't the most common kind of shade. Here is Wiggleze, which Anastasia Beverly Hills describes as a metallic cranberry red. I know these swatches look kind of haphazard. Don't worry, I'm gonna put like a more pretty organized swatch later in the video. The fourth shade in the second row is Brave, which is described as a warm mid-toned brown loaded with golden pearl. So this is one of those mattes with glitter in it. And you know, like, you remember when people hated that, and then Tati Beauty came out with her palette and everyone was like, oh my god, it's a sequin formula, it's not matte with glitter, but it's that. So for this one, I just picked a matte shade, and for that, I reached into my Honey for this bottom right shade called Buzzkill, and in the pan, Buzzkill may look deeper than what Brave is. However, Buzzkill really doesn't go on like this deep when you put it on the skin or the eyes. I remember when I first got this palette, I was actually very shocked at how yellow Buzzkill was. And the description for Buzzkill is a matte yellow brown, which I would agree with. There's Buzzkill. We have 6 shades left. I have pretty much used up the real estate on this arm, so I'll start swatching on my other forearm for the rest of the shades. The last shade in the second row is Strength, which is described as a rich terracotta. This is what I was talking about before. I wouldn't have described this shade as a rich terracotta. I think it is a kind of muted terracotta. And the initial eyeshadows in my collection that I gravitated towards ended up being too terracotta compared to the swatches that I saw of Brave. So the one that I did choose comes from the Tartelette Toasted palette, and it is this matte mid-tone shade called Warmth, which is officially described as terracotta. Even this may be a little bit too richly orange, but it was the best I could find. Here is Warmth from Tarte. Now we're finally on to the last row of this palette. The first shade is called True, described as a cool black and brown, and I immediately knew which shade was going to be the dupe for that from the So Jaded palette. It is this shade called Stone, described as a cool deep brown on the Colourpop website. Here is Stoned. There you go, a really, really cool toned deep brown shade. I also find the formula of this particular shade in the So Jaded palette is a little bit drier than the other ones. Just like random thought while touching it. Second shade in the last row is Undefeated, another red shade described as Ruby Red. And the pick that I have for this is Crimson Red from this palette. And honestly, it is just another red metallic. Ruby from So Jaded and Wigglies from Anastasia Beverly Hills, I actually did find to be very similar. However, like if you really, really looked hard at a comparison swatch between those two, the Wigglies has a little bit more warmth, which is why I paired it with the one with the gold flecks. Here's Ruby from So Jaded. And I'm just gonna build up Ruby a bit so we can see more of that shine. And this is not a super like whoop bam metallic. It's more of like a smooth sheen of a metallic. But here's Ruby. The third to last shade is one of those blacks with glitter in it. It is called Defiant, described as black with silver and gold pearl. And here is Onyx, described as a charcoal with silver pearl. I'm not talking about these shades as much because just the descriptions are pretty self-explanatory, and as well as the swatches are pretty self-explanatory. So here's Onyx. It's a bit of a flaky formula. And there it is. And I'm just reminded of the time where everybody hated on blacks with glitters, but look at us now. I still don't really like them that much, but to each their own. Two left, and the second to last one is Guiding Spirit, described as a deep red brown. And the corresponding shade is Jasper, which is described as a red brown on Colourpop's website. And Guiding Spirit is one of those shades that, even though the description is a deep red brown, this is a shade that I mentioned earlier that is a very, very, very brown red brown, which is also the case for Jasper. But I was looking at some of my warm tone palettes, like Tartelette, for example, but the deep shades in Tartelette were too red to use as a dupe for Guiding Spirit. But nonetheless, Jasper is a pretty good one. So here's Jasper, a red brown, which is a pretty brown, red brown. That swatch is horrible. You can tell I'm getting tired of swatching, but here it is, and we have one shade. The final shade is Legacy, a chocolate brown with gold pearl, which means a matte brown with gold glitter. And for this one, unless you're packing this deep, rich chocolate brown onto your entire eye with your finger, you're not gonna really be able to see the glitter anyway. Or I would pretty much use that color as a matte brown. So I picked a matte brown from the Going Coconuts palette. So the shade I picked is Nutty, which on Colourpop's site is described as Deep Umber. Last swatch, baby. Here is, what is it called? Nutty from Going Coconuts. So here are the shades that I pulled out as dupes for this palette. And because this looks kind of haphazard and disorganized, I will put all the dupes on my arm. I will bless your eyes with the swatches all together on my arm. And I will also be comparing them to Amanda's from Makeup Just for Fun. Additionally, because most of these shades are Colourpop eyeshadows that come in palettes, every one of these shades you can just pop out and they're magnetic, so you can put it in a magnetic palette. So I'm gonna go through this list, pop out all the shades that I can, and put it in a separate magnetic palette so I can show you the actual arrangement of the shades that I mentioned. Ta-da! So here are all of the shades except for 2, which I couldn't take out of their palette. The left missing shade is Twig, which is a cool brown from the Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry palette. And the center middle shade is Wigglisse from the Anastasia Beverly Hills Jackie Aina palette. Now, tell me that this doesn't look like I totally nailed the vibes of the Mulan palette from Colourpop. I also used these shades on my eyes in my look today. And let me just talk through what I used. What I did was first go in with Royal Jewels, that peachy shade, just all over the lid. Then I went in with Jasper from So Jaded and put that on the outer corner and inner corner of my eyes. In the middle of that halo, I put Ruby from So Jaded for that red metallic shade. And then in the center of my eyelids and along my lower lash line, I hit that with Queen from Aha Honey. And then on the inner corner, I just dabbed a teeny tiny bit of, what was this called? That white shade from the Coconuts, the Going Coconuts palette. So I would say that I nailed it. This video took a lot of work, but it was one of the most fun that I had organizing, planning, and filming and carrying out. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, rest of your time in quarantine if you're still in quarantine when you're watching this video. And you are treasured. Be strong, be courageous, be bold, find the beauty in every day, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!